Welcome to the Facilitators Deep Dive Podcast, your podcast on your way to facilitation mastery.
Welcome to your deep dive into the world of Kanban.
All right.
You've given us excerpts from Klaus Leopold's Practical Kanban, and it's a fantastic resource for anyone looking to understand how this system can be applied in a business setting.
Oh, absolutely.
So we're going to unpack some of the key principles and practices so you can see how Kanban can help you improve your workflow, prioritize tasks, and ultimately make better decisions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's interesting how Kanban, which originated in manufacturing, can be so effectively applied to knowledge work.
Yeah.
It's all about optimizing flow and getting things done in a more efficient and less stressful way.
You mentioned feeling overwhelmed with projects and struggling to prioritize.
Right.
And Leopold actually addresses that right away with a simulation involving shipbuilding.
Yeah.
I know it sounds a bit random, but it perfectly illustrates a core Kanban principle.
He compares a push system where everyone just cranks out ships as fast as they can to a pull system where each person can only work on one ship at a time.
Okay.
The interesting thing is that both systems produce the same number of ships, but the pull system is significantly faster and less stressful.
Wait, so by slowing down and focusing on one ship at a time,
that's right,
they actually end up building ships faster. That seems counterintuitive.
Exactly. And it's not just about ships.
Right.
Think about your own work.
Yeah.
When you're juggling multiple tasks, you're constantly switching gears, losing focus and increasing the risk of errors.
Yeah.
But when you focus on one task at a time and see it through to completion, you can work more efficiently and deliver higher quality results.
So the takeaway here is that by reducing the number of tasks you're juggling at once,
that's it,
you can actually get things done faster and with less stress.
Right.
It's like that saying, slow is smooth and smooth is fast.
Good voice, Lee. And this leads us to another important point that Leopold makes, the need to understand the entire work system. He uses this great analogy of building a Ferrari, but not having a road to drive it on.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can see how that applies to business. You might have a team of rockstar developers building amazing features.
Right.
But if the marketing team isn't ready to launch them, it's like having that Ferrari stuck in the garage.
Exactly. Optimizing just one part of your business isn't enough.
Right.
You need to look at the whole system to get things moving smoothly. And that's where the concept of a value stream comes in.
So how does understanding your value stream help with this big picture thinking?
A value stream is the journey a piece of work takes from its inception to its completion.
Okay.
It's essentially all the steps involved in delivering a product or service to your customer. By mapping out your value stream, you can see the big picture and identify any bottlenecks or inefficiencies that are slowing things down.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's not just about individual tasks.
Right.
It's about understanding the entire flow of work from start to finish. It's like seeing the whole highway and not just the car you're driving.
Exactly. And once you understand your value stream, you can start to see where you can apply Kanban's core practices to optimize the flow and deliver value faster.
Leopold outlines 6 of these core practices.
Right.
Visualizing, limiting WIP, managing flow, making policies explicit, implementing feedback loops, and improving collaboratively, evolving experimentally.
Okay.
That's quite a mouthful.
It might seem like a lot, but they all work together to create a more efficient and effective system.
Okay.
Let's start with visualizing, which is absolutely fundamental to Kanban.
We're not just talking about a to-do list here, right?
No, a Kanban board is a visual representation of your workflow, where each column represents a stage in the process and each card represents a work item.
Right.
This allows you to see the status of each item at a glance, track progress, and identify any bottlenecks or blockages.
Speaking of bottlenecks, Leopold dedicates a whole section to WIP limits, which are essentially limits on how much work can be in progress at any given time.
Right.
So they're not just about saying no to new work.
Exactly. They're about making sure you finish what you start before taking on more.
Okay.
It's about creating focus, minimizing multitasking, and ultimately delivering faster.
Right.
It's actually backed by a mathematical principle called Little's Law.
Okay, let's unpack this. How does math play into managing work?
Think of it like this. You're at a sausage kiosk with a long line.
Okay.
The faster the vendor serves customers, the shorter the wait time.
Okay.
That's Little's Law in a nutshell.
Right.
It tells us that reducing the queue, in this case the number of tasks in progress, directly translates to faster delivery times.
So by reducing the number of tasks you're actively working on at any given time, you can actually get things done faster.
That's amazing.
That's amazing. It sounds like I need to start saying no more often.
It's not necessarily about saying no,
right,
but about being strategic about what you commit to and when.
Okay.
And that's where making policies explicit comes in.
This is one of those core practices we mentioned earlier, right?
Yes.
So what does it mean to make policies explicit in a Kanban system?
It means defining clear rules and guidelines for how work flows through your system.
Okay.
This could include things like defining the criteria for moving a task from one stage to the next, establishing service level agreements, or setting expectations for response times.
So it's about creating transparency and alignment around how work gets done.
Yeah.
Kind of like setting ground rules for a game so everyone knows how to play.
Exactly. And this leads us to another important practice, implementing feedback loops. Kanban is all about continuous improvement. And feedback loops are essential for gathering information, identifying areas for improvement, and making adjustments along the way.
So what are some practical ways to implement feedback loops in a Kanban system?
There are many ways.
Yeah.
But some common examples include daily stand-up meetings, regular retrospectives, and customer feedback mechanisms. The key is to create a culture where feedback is welcomed, valued, and used to drive continuous improvement.
And this brings us to the final core practice, improving collaboratively, evolving experimentally.
Right.
It sounds like it's all about embracing a mindset of continuous learning and adaptation.
Precisely. Kanban is not a rigid set of rules.
Right.
It's a framework that encourages experimentation, learning from experience, and continuously adapting to meet evolving needs.
So it's not about finding the perfect Kanban system.
That's right.
It's about constantly evolving and improving it based on feedback and data.
Right.
It's a journey, not a destination.
Exactly. And that's what makes Kanban so powerful.
Oh.
It's a system that's designed to help us not only get things done more efficiently, but also to continuously learn and improve along the way.
Now, even with the best designed system, unexpected obstacles are bound to pop up.
Right.
Leopold calls these blockades.
And
he has some interesting thoughts on how to handle them.
He defines a blockade as an unforeseeable occurrence resulting in a piece of work that can no longer move forward in the workflow.
Okay.
It's essentially anything that brings your work to a screeching halt.
So how do you deal with these blockades? Do you just increase the WIP limit to accommodate the extra work?
That might seem like a quick fix.
Yeah.
But remember, too much work in progress can actually slow things down.
Right.
Ignoring blockades is also not a sustainable solution.
So that leaves us with improving the system itself. But how do you even begin to do that?
That's where blocker clustering comes in.
Okay.
It's a technique for identifying recurrent blockades and their root causes.
Right.
It's about understanding why things are getting stuck and finding ways to prevent those blockades from happening in the future.
So instead of just reacting to blockades as they come up, blocker clustering helps you be more proactive and prevent them from happening in the first place. That's a really powerful concept.
Absolutely. And it has a direct impact on your ability to deliver value to your customers.
It sounds like blocker clustering is a key part of creating a smoother, more efficient workflow.
It is.
But it's probably not a one-time fix, right?
No.
You need to constantly monitor and adapt as new challenges emerge.
Exactly. Continuous improvement is key.
Okay.
You need to keep track of your blockades, analyze the data, and adapt your system accordingly.
So what are some practical ways to track and analyze blockades? Do you just keep a list of every time something gets stuck?
You could start with a simple list, but a more effective approach is to use visual tools like a Kanban board.
Okay.
You can add a dedicated column for blockades or use colored labels to identify blocked tasks. This way you can easily see which tasks are blocked, why they're blocked, and how long they've been stuck.
And by tracking this information over time, you can start to see patterns emerge and identify those recurring blockades that are really slowing you down.
Right.
It's like having a detective on your team uncovering the hidden culprits that are sabotaging your workflow.
Exactly. And once you've identified the culprits, you can start to develop strategies for preventing them from causing trouble in the future.
Okay.
This might involve streamlining processes, improving communication, or even restructuring teams.
So it's not just about fixing individual blockades.
Right.
It's about addressing the underlying causes and making systemic changes to prevent them from happening again.
That's right.
It's like fixing the leaky pipe instead of just mopping up the floor.
Precisely. And this leads us to another important concept that Leopold emphasizes: customer validation.
This sounds like it ties back to that idea of understanding the entire work system and making sure you're delivering value to your customer.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Customer validation is about ensuring that the work you're doing actually meets the needs and expectations of your customers.
Okay.
It's not enough to just complete a task or project.
Right.
You need to make sure it's actually valuable to the end user.
So it's not just about internal efficiency.
Right.
It's about making sure you're building the right things in the right way.
Yeah.
It's like making sure you're building a house that the homeowner actually wants to live in.
Exactly. And Leopold provides a great example of how a robot software company integrated customer validation into their Kanban system.
Okay.
They realized that just because they had installed the software
Right.
didn't mean the project was truly done.
So they needed a way to ensure that the software was actually working as intended and meeting the customer's needs. What did they do?
They added a validation column to their Kanban board,
Okay.
which represented a dedicated step for gathering feedback from customers after the software was installed. This way, they could address any issues or make any necessary adjustments before considering the project complete.
That's a brilliant example of how a simple visual cue on a Kanban board can have a huge impact on the way you work and the value you deliver to your customers.
Right.
It's about making customer feedback an integral part of your process, not just an afterthought.
Precisely. And this focus on customer validation ties directly into another key concept: prioritization.
This is something I definitely struggle with.
I know, it's a tough one.
There are always so many demands.
Yeah.
And it's tough to figure out what to focus on first.
Right.
I feel like everything is a priority.
That's a common problem.
Yeah.
And Leopold addresses it head-on by introducing a concept called cost of delay.
Okay, let's break this down.
Okay.
What is cost of delay, and how does it help with prioritization?
It's essentially the cost of not doing something.
Okay.
It's about understanding the potential lost revenue,
Okay.
missed opportunities, and even risks associated with delaying a particular task or project. And it can be a game changer for making decisions about what to work on first.
So instead of just saying, this is important or that's urgent,
Yeah.
you actually put a dollar value on the delay.
Right.
That makes it much more concrete and objective.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it helps you prioritize based on the financial impact,
Okay.
which is something that resonates with most businesses.
So how do you actually calculate cost of delay? Is it a complicated formula?
It can be,
Okay.
but Leopold provides some practical examples
Okay.
and a step-by-step guide in his book.
Okay.
The key is to consider all the potential costs associated with the delay,
Right.
including lost revenue,
Mm-hmm.
missed deadlines, and potential damage to customer relationships.
So it's not just about the immediate costs,
Right.
but also the long-term impact of the delay. It's like thinking about the ripple effect of a stone thrown into a pond.
Exactly.
Okay.
And this brings us to another important aspect of prioritization: understanding the different types of value and how they relate to time.
Okay. I'm intrigued. What are the different types of value and how does time play into it?
Leopold uses the analogy of a wine connoisseur to explain this.
Okay.
Imagine you have a wine collection filled with only 4-star bottles.
Okay.
At first it seems great,
Yeah.
but eventually it loses its meaning and becomes unmanageable.
I see.
You can't possibly enjoy all those amazing wines at once,
Right.
and the sheer volume becomes a burden rather than a pleasure.
It's like having too much of a good thing.
Yeah.
You become overwhelmed and can't appreciate any of it.
Exactly. And it's the same with tasks and projects.
Yeah.
If everything is labeled as high priority, the system becomes meaningless.
Uh-huh.
You need to understand the different types of value and how they change over time.
So some tasks might have a high initial value that decays quickly, while others might have a more stable value that's less sensitive to delays.
Right.
It's like some wines age better than others.
Precisely. And by understanding these different value profiles, you can make more informed decisions about what to work on, first maximizing the value you deliver over time.
This is all starting to make sense,
Okay.
but it's a lot to take in.
I know it can be.
How do you actually apply these concepts in a practical way?
One way is to use visual tools like priority profiles,
Okay.
which graphically represent the relationship between the value of a task and the time it takes to complete it.
Right.
These profiles can help you see which tasks are most time-sensitive and prioritize accordingly.
So it's about combining the concept of cost of delay with an understanding of how value changes over time.
Right.
It's a much more strategic and data-driven approach to prioritization.
Exactly. And it can help you make much more informed decisions about what to work on first,
Okay.
ensuring that you're focusing on the tasks that will deliver the most value to your customers.
This has been incredibly insightful.
Okay.
But I have to admit, it's also a bit daunting.
I understand.
It feels like there's so much to learn and so many things to consider when implementing Kanban.
It can feel overwhelming at first.
Yeah.
But remember, Kanban is a journey, not a destination. You don't have to implement everything at once.
Okay.
Start with small, incremental changes.
Yeah.
Experiment with different practices and learn as you go.
So it's about embracing that continuous improvement mindset and constantly adapting and evolving your system based on feedback and experience.
Exactly. And the beauty of Kanban is that it provides a framework for doing just that.
Yeah.
It's a system that's designed to help you not only get things done more efficiently, but also to continuously learn and improve along the way.
Now, before we wrap things up,
Okay.
I want to touch on another crucial aspect of Kanban
Yeah.
that often gets overlooked,
Okay.
the importance of risk assessment.
Oh, yeah.
It's easy to get caught up in the day-to-day tasks and deadlines.
Right.
But taking a step back to assess potential risks can save us a lot of headaches down the road.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And Leopold does a great job of breaking down this complex topic into manageable chunks.
Okay.
He starts by acknowledging that knowledge work is inherently uncertain. We can't predict the future with 100% accuracy.
Right.
And there will always be some level of risk involved in everything we do.
But that doesn't mean we should just throw our hands up in defeat and surrender to the chaos.
Exactly. Instead, Leopold encourages us to embrace a more proactive approach to risk management.
Okay.
He argues that by understanding and quantifying potential risks, we can make more informed decisions, prioritize strategically, and develop effective mitigation strategies to minimize potential negative impact.
So how do you even begin to approach risk assessment? Where do you start?
A good place to start is by understanding the two main types of risks we often encounter in knowledge work:
Okay.
technical risk
Okay.
and market risk.
Okay, let's break those down.
Okay.
What's the difference between technical risk and market risk?
Technical risk is all about whether something will work as intended.
Right.
It's the possibility that a new software feature might have bugs, or a manufacturing process might have flaws.
Okay.
Market risk, on the other hand, is about whether the market will respond favorably to what you're creating.
So market risk is about things like changing customer preferences, new competitors emerging, or even economic downturns that could impact the success of your product or service.
Exactly. And once you understand these different types of risks, you can start to identify potential risks specific to your projects and assess their likelihood and impact.
So how do you go about assessing the likelihood and impact of a risk? Do you just go with your gut feeling?
While intuition can play a role, it's important to have a more structured approach.
Okay.
Leopold suggests using a simple but effective method called expected value calculation.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
All right.
What is expected value calculation and how does it work?
It involves multiplying the potential cost of a risk by its probability of occurrence.
Okay.
So if a risk has a high cost but a low probability, its expected value might be lower than a risk with a lower cost but a high probability.
I see.
This gives you a numerical value that can help you compare different risks and prioritize your mitigation efforts.
That makes sense. So instead of just thinking about what could go wrong, you actually put numbers to it, which makes it much easier to compare and prioritize risks.
Exactly. And to make it even easier to visualize and compare different risks, you can use something called a risk profile diagram.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Okay.
What's a risk profile diagram and how does it help with a risk assessment?
It's a visual representation of the relationship between the magnitude of a risk and its probability.
Okay.
It's essentially a graph where the x-axis represents the probability of the risk occurring, and the y-axis represents the impact or cost of the risk.
So a risk with a high probability and a high impact would be plotted in the upper right corner of the diagram.
That's right.
While a risk with a low probability and a low impact would be plotted in the lower left corner. It's a quick and easy way to see which risks are most significant.
Exactly. And to take risk assessment even further, Leopold introduces a 5-dimension risk model.
Okay, 5 dimensions of risk.
Yeah.
Sounds complicated.
It's not as bad as it sounds.
What are these dimensions and how do they help with risk assessment?
The 5 dimensions are cost of delay,
Okay.
effects of cost of delay,
Okay.
technical risk,
Okay.
market risk,
Okay.
and product lifecycle.
Okay.
By considering all these dimensions, you can gain a more holistic understanding of the risks associated with a particular project or task.
So instead of just looking at the risk itself, you're also considering the context in which the risk is occurring.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
It's like understanding that a small leak in a boat is much more serious if you're in the middle of the ocean than if you're docked at the harbor.
Exactly. And to visualize these 5 dimensions of risk,
Yeah.
Leopold suggests using a spider chart.
A spider chart. I haven't heard of that before.
Okay.
How does it work?
It's a visual representation of data using radial axis.
Okay.
Each axis represents one of the 5 dimensions of risk, and you plot the risk level for each dimension on its corresponding axis. This creates a shape that visually represents the overall risk profile of a project or task.
So you can quickly see which dimensions have the highest risk levels and focus your mitigation efforts accordingly.
Right.
It's like having a radar screen that shows you where the storm clouds are gathering.
Exactly. And the key takeaway here is that risk assessment is not just about identifying and quantifying risks. It's about using that information to make better decisions and prioritize strategically.
So you're not just reacting to risks as they come up. You're proactively identifying them.
That's right.
Assessing their potential impact and developing strategies to mitigate them before they become major problems.
Precisely. And this leads us to another crucial aspect of Kanban, the importance of managing flow.
Flow.
Yeah.
We've talked about value streams, visualizing work,
Right.
but how does flow fit into the Kanban picture?
Flow is all about the smooth and uninterrupted movement of work items through your Kanban system. It's about creating a predictable and sustainable rhythm of work, where tasks move through the system at a consistent pace without getting stuck or delayed.
So it's not just about getting things done quickly.
Right.
It's about creating a smooth and predictable process. It's like the difference between a rushing river and a calmly flowing stream.
Exactly. And to achieve that smooth flow, you need to apply some of the core Kanban practices we've already discussed.
Okay.
Like visualizing workflow, limiting work in progress, managing queues, and addressing blockades proactively.
So it's all interconnected.
It is.
Visualizing work helps you identify bottlenecks in areas where work is piling up.
Right.
Limiting work in progress helps prevent those bottlenecks in the first place. Managing queues helps ensure that work items are pulled through the system in a predictable way.
Yeah.
And addressing blockades proactively helps keep the flow moving smoothly.
Precisely. And to illustrate the importance of managing flow, Leopold uses the analogy of traffic on a highway.
When traffic is flowing smoothly, cars can travel at a consistent speed, reaching their destinations quickly and efficiently.
Right.
But when bottlenecks occur, like accidents, road construction, or just too many cars entering the highway, traffic slows down, creating delays, frustration, and wasted time and fuel.
So just like with highway traffic, we can improve the flow of work in our Kanban systems by identifying and addressing bottlenecks, limiting work in progress, and using pull systems to ensure that work items are pulled through the system only when there's capacity available.
Exactly. And one of the key techniques for creating that pull-based flow is using something called Kanban signals.
Okay, let's unpack this. What are Kanban signals and how do they help with managing flow?
They're essentially visual cues that indicate when it's time to pull new work into a particular stage of your workflow.
Okay.
For example, you might have a signal that indicates when the number of tasks in a particular column falls below a certain threshold. So instead of pushing work through the system, you're creating a system where work is pulled through based on demand and capacity. It's like having a just-in-time delivery system for your tasks.
Precisely. And this pull-based approach can be much more efficient and responsive than a push-based system where work is constantly being pushed through, regardless of whether there's capacity to handle it.
This makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
But how do you actually implement Kanban signals in a practical way? Do you need special software or tools?
You can use software,
Yeah.
but it can be as simple as using physical cards or markers on your Kanban board.
Okay.
The key is to have a clear and visual way to signal when it's time to pull new work into a particular stage of your workflow.
So you could use something as simple as a colored card that you place in a column when the number of tasks falls below a certain level.
Right.
And when someone sees that card, they know it's time to pull new work from the previous column.
Exactly. And this simple visual cue will have a huge impact on the flow of work through your system.
It sounds like a really effective way to create a more responsive and efficient workflow.
It is.
And it's a great example of how Kanban can be implemented in a very practical and tangible way.
Absolutely. And to illustrate the power of pull systems in the real world, Leopold shares a case study from a manufacturing company that successfully implemented a pull system using Kanban signals to improve their production flow.
What kind of improvements did they see?
They saw a significant reduction in lead times,
Okay.
a decrease in work-in-progress inventory, and an increase in overall efficiency.
Okay.
Their story is a great example of how Kanban can be applied in a variety of settings to improve flow and deliver value faster.
That's inspiring. It shows that these principles can be applied beyond software development and IT to really any type of work that involves a process and a flow.
Exactly. And it highlights the versatility and adaptability of Kanban as a framework for improving workflows and delivering value.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today.
It feels like it.
And I feel like I've learned a lot about the core principles of Kanban.
Yeah. And how they can be applied to improve workflow and make better decisions.
It's a great start.
But I'm sure there's still much more to explore.
Oh, there is.
In the world of Kanban.
Absolutely.
So stay tuned.
We'll be back.
We'll be back soon to continue our deep dive into Kanban and explore even more insights from Klaus Leopold's Practical Kanban.
Sounds good.
Until then, keep experimenting, keep learning, and keep striving for excellence.
See you next time.
Bye.
Bye. It's amazing how Stute Logistics was able to transform their IT department using Kanban. They went from chaos to clarity, from firefighting to flow.
Their story is a great example of how these principles can really make a difference in the real world. But shifting gears a bit, I know a lot of people struggle with the idea of forecasting.
Yeah.
Especially in knowledge work where things can feel so unpredictable.
It's true that knowledge work can be unpredictable, but Leopold argues that we can still use data and models to make more informed predictions.
So we're not talking about gazing into a crystal ball here. It's more about using historical data and trends.
Right. To get a better sense of what might happen in the future.
Exactly. He introduces the concept of model-based forecasting, which is about using data to create simulations that help us predict potential outcomes.
That sounds a bit complicated. Can you give an example of how this works in a way that even I can understand?
Imagine you're trying to predict how much apple juice you can make from a batch of apples.
Okay.
You could try to estimate the juice yield of each apple individually.
Right.
But that would be very time-consuming and probably inaccurate.
It would be like trying to predict the weather by analyzing every single raindrop.
Exactly. A better approach would be to take a random sample of apples, measure their juice yield, and then use that data to create a statistical model that predicts the potential range of juice production from the entire batch.
So you're using a small sample to get a sense of the bigger picture.
Right.
And that's how model-based forecasting works in knowledge work as well.
Precisely. You can use historical data about your team's performance, like cycle times throughput and the number of tasks completed, to create models that predict future outcomes.
So it's not about eliminating uncertainty. It's about using data to manage uncertainty more effectively.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And one of the most powerful tools for model-based forecasting is something called Monte Carlo simulation.
Okay, I have to admit that name sounds a bit intimidating. What is Monte Carlo simulation and why is it so powerful?
It's a statistical technique that uses random sampling to simulate thousands of possible outcomes.
Okay.
This gives you a much more comprehensive and realistic view of potential scenarios than traditional forecasting methods that rely on single-point estimates.
So instead of saying, we'll finish this project in 3 months, you're running simulations that show a range of possible completion dates along with their probabilities.
Right.
That's a much more nuanced and data-driven approach.
Exactly. And this can be incredibly valuable for making decisions, managing risks, and setting realistic expectations.
It sounds like Monte Carlo simulation can be a really powerful tool for anyone who wants to improve their forecasting abilities and make more informed decisions in the face of uncertainty. But shifting gears a bit.
Okay.
Let's talk about something that's a bit more tangible.
Okay.
The power of visualization in Kanban.
Visualization is absolutely crucial in Kanban.
Yeah.
It's about making the invisible visible, bringing your work out of your head and into a shared space where everyone can see it.
So we're not just talking about pretty pictures or fancy diagrams.
No.
We're talking about using visual tools to understand and manage work more effectively.
Exactly. And the most important visual tool in Kanban is the Kanban board.
We touched on this earlier.
We did.
But can you remind us what a Kanban board is and why it's so important?
A Kanban board is a visual representation of your workflow, where each column represents a different stage of the process, and each card represents a work item.
Right.
It's essentially a snapshot of your work in progress, showing you where each item is in the process, who's working on it, and any obstacles that might be blocking it.
It's like having an X-ray vision into your workflow.
I like that.
You can see the bones of the process and identify any areas where things are getting stuck or flowing smoothly.
Exactly. And the beauty of a Kanban board is that it's a shared space.
Right.
Everyone on the team can see it, which improves communication, fosters collaboration, and creates a sense of shared ownership over the work.
So it's not just about tracking tasks.
Right.
It's about creating a shared understanding of the work and how it's progressing.
Yeah.
It's like having a map that everyone can refer to as they navigate the project.
Precisely. And the visual nature of the Kanban board makes it easy to spot patterns, identify problems, and make informed decisions about how to improve the flow of work.
It sounds like the Kanban board is really the heart of the Kanban system.
It is.
But it's not just a static tool, right?
No, it's not.
It's something that evolves and adapts as your work changes.
Absolutely. You're constantly updating the board, moving cards from one column to the next as work progresses, adding new cards as new work items emerge, and removing cards as tasks are completed.
It's like a living, breathing organism that reflects the dynamic nature of knowledge work.
I like that analogy.
And this leads us to another key concept in Kanban, work in progress, WIP limits.
WIP limits are essential for controlling the flow of work and preventing bottlenecks.
We talked about this briefly earlier.
Yeah.
But can you explain a little more about how WIP limits work and why they're so important?
A WIP limit is a constraint that you place on the number of work items that can be in progress at any given time within a specific stage of your workflow.
So you might say that no more than 3 tasks can be in the development column at any given time.
Right.
And this helps prevent too much work from piling up in one stage.
Exactly.
And creating a bottleneck.
Exactly. WIP limits help you focus, reduce multitasking, and shorten lead times by ensuring that you're finishing existing tasks before starting new ones.
It sounds like a really effective way to control the flow of work.
It is.
And prevent things from getting out of hand. But how do you determine the right WIP limits for your team or workflow?
Right. Is it just a matter of picking a number and sticking to it?
It's a bit more nuanced than that.
Okay.
Setting WIP limits is a process of experimentation and learning.
Right.
You start with a reasonable number, observe how it impacts your workflow, and then adjust accordingly.
So it's not about finding the perfect WIP limit.
That's right.
It's about finding the right balance for your team and your work.
Exactly.
It's like finding the right temperature setting on a thermostat.
I like that.
You might need to adjust it up or down depending on the conditions.
Exactly. And it's important to involve the team in the process of setting and adjusting WIP limits.
Okay.
They're the ones who are doing the work, so they have valuable insights into what works best for them.
It sounds like WIP limits are a really powerful tool for improving flow.
They are.
And creating a more predictable and sustainable rhythm of work. But even with WIP limits in place, things can still get stuck. Sometimes that's where blocker clustering comes in, right? Exactly. Blocker clustering is a technique for identifying and addressing those pesky obstacles that can bring your work to a grinding halt.
We talked about this in the context of managing blockades.
We did.
But can you remind us how blocker clustering works and why it's so important?
It involves collecting data about why work items are getting blocked, grouping similar blockades into clusters, and then analyzing those clusters to identify patterns and root causes.
So you're not just fixing individual blockades, you're looking for systemic issues that are causing those blockades to occur in the first place. It's like finding the source of a leak instead of just mopping up the water.
Exactly. And by identifying those root causes, you can develop effective solutions that prevent those blockades from happening again in the future.
So it's a proactive approach to problem solving,
yes,
rather than just reacting to problems as they arise.
Precisely. And to illustrate the power of blocker clustering in the real world, Leopold shares a case study of a software development team that was struggling with frequent blockades.
What kind of blockades were they facing?
They were experiencing a lot of blockades due to missing requirements.
Okay.
Tasks would get stuck because the developers didn't have all the information they needed to start working.
That's a common problem in software development.
It is.
And it can be really frustrating for everyone involved.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But by implementing blocker clustering, the team was able to identify the root cause of the problem, a lack of clarity and consistency in their requirements gathering process.
So it wasn't just about fixing the individual blockades. It was about addressing the underlying process that was causing those blockades to occur.
Exactly. They realized that they needed a more structured and collaborative approach to gathering requirements involving stakeholders earlier in the process and using standardized templates to document those requirements.
And did this solve the problem?
It made a huge difference. The number of blockades due to missing requirements decreased dramatically, and the team's overall productivity and flow improved significantly.
That's a great example of how blocker clustering can be used to not only identify problems, but also develop effective solutions that prevent those problems from recurring. It's a powerful tool for anyone who wants to improve their workflow and eliminate those frustrating bottlenecks that can slow down progress.
Absolutely. And it's a great illustration of the Kanban principle of continuous improvement.
Right.
It's about constantly looking for ways to optimize your workflow, eliminate waste, and deliver value faster.
Now, I know we talked about customer validation earlier,
right?
But I'd love to hear another example of how this principle can be applied in a real-world setting.
Leopold shares a really interesting case study about a software development company that specialized in building software for industrial robots.
That sounds fascinating. What were some of the challenges they were facing?
They were struggling with long lead times, frequent bugs, and a disconnect between their internal development process and the actual needs of their customers.
So they were building technically sophisticated software, but it wasn't always meeting the specific requirements of their customers.
Exactly. And this led to a lot of rework delays and frustration on both sides.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So they decided to implement Kanban and integrate customer validation into their workflow.
What were some of the key changes they made?
One of the most significant changes was the introduction of a dedicated validation column on their Kanban board.
So this column represented a specific step in their workflow where they actively sought feedback from customers after installing the software.
Right.
It wasn't just about completing the technical work. It was about ensuring that the software actually met the customer's needs.
Exactly. And they also established a clear time frame for this validation step.
Okay.
Based on historical data about when they were most likely to receive bug reports and feedback from customers.
So they were using data to inform their process and make it more customer-centric. Did they see any improvement?
The results were dramatic by actively seeking and addressing customer feedback. Early on, they were able to reduce the number of bugs, shorten lead times, and improve overall customer satisfaction. But more importantly, they transformed their relationship with their customers.
So it wasn't just about technical improvements. It was about building stronger relationships with their customers.
Exactly. The customers felt heard, valued, and involved in the development process. This led to increased loyalty and a much more collaborative and enjoyable working relationship.
It's a great example of how Kanban can be used to not only improve efficiency, but also to enhance customer relationships and deliver more value.
Absolutely.
Speaking of delivering value, we've talked a lot about the tools and techniques of Kanban, but what about the people?
That's a great point.
How does Kanban address the human element of work?
That's a crucial point.
Yeah.
Kanban is not just about processes and systems. It's about creating a work environment where people feel valued, empowered, and motivated to contribute their best work.
So it's about more than just getting things done.
It is.
It's about creating a positive and supportive work culture.
Exactly. And Leopold dedicates a whole section in his book to the human element of Kanban.
Okay.
Emphasizing the importance of leadership, collaboration, and continuous learning.
I'm curious to hear more about that. What are some of the key takeaways about leadership in a Kanban system?
He emphasizes that Kanban leaders are not about commanding and controlling.
Okay.
They're more like facilitators, coaches, and servant leaders who focus on removing obstacles for their teams and empowering them to succeed.
So it's less about top-down directives.
Yeah.
And more about creating a collaborative and supportive environment where teams can thrive.
Exactly. And this requires a shift in mindset for many leaders.
Right.
It's about trusting your team, giving them autonomy, and focusing on creating the conditions for success rather than micromanaging every detail.
It sounds like a much more empowering and engaging way to lead.
It is.
What about collaboration? How does Kanban foster collaboration within teams?
Kanban emphasizes transparency and communication.
Okay.
The Kanban board itself is a visual representation of the team's work, making it easy for everyone to see what's happening.
Right.
identify dependencies, and collaborate effectively.
So it's not just about individuals working on their own tasks.
Right.
It's about working together as a team to achieve a shared goal. And this ties into the idea of continuous learning as well, right?
Absolutely. Kanban encourages a culture of continuous learning and improvement. Teams are constantly reflecting on their work, identifying areas where they can improve, and experimenting with new ideas.
It sounds like Kanban is not just a system for managing work.
Right.
It's a philosophy for approaching work in a more collaborative, efficient, and human-centered way.
Precisely. And it's a philosophy that can be applied to any type of work,
Right.
from software development to marketing to manufacturing.
This has been incredibly insightful, but we've covered a lot of ground today.
No, we have.
Is there anything else from Leopold's book that you think our listeners should know about?
One topic we haven't touched on yet is the importance of meetings in a Kanban system. Now, I know what you're thinking. Meetings.
Meetings. Aren't those the things we're trying to avoid?
Exactly. Meetings often get a bad rap for being time wasters and productivity killers.
Right.
But I'm intrigued.
Okay.
How do meetings fit into the Kanban philosophy? Leopold acknowledges that meetings can be wasteful if they're not conducted effectively. But he argues that certain types of meetings, when done right, can play a crucial role in a successful Kanban system.
So it's not about eliminating meetings altogether.
Right.
It's about being more strategic and intentional about how we use them.
Exactly.
What are some of the types of meetings that can be valuable in a Kanban context?
He suggests 3 types. Stand-up meetings, replenishment meetings, and retrospectives.
Okay, let's break those down. What are stand-up meetings?
Stand-up meetings are short focus meetings where team members gather to share updates, identify obstacles, and coordinate their work. They're typically time-boxed to 15 minutes or less and held in front of the Kanban board.
So it's a quick and efficient way to get everyone on the same page.
Yes.
And address any issues that might be blocking progress. It's like a daily huddle where the team can check in, align on priorities, and make sure everyone's moving in the right direction.
Exactly. And the visual nature of the Kanban board makes it easy to identify bottlenecks, dependencies, and opportunities for collaboration.
So it's not just about talking, it's about using the visual cues on the board to guide the conversation and make it more productive. What about replenishment meetings? What are those all about?
Replenishment meetings are periodic meetings where stakeholders gather to review the work items in the option pool. And decide which ones to pull into the Kanban system for execution.
So it's about making sure that the Kanban system always has a steady stream of high-priority work items to keep the flow going. Who's typically involved in these replenishment meetings?
It depends on the organization and the nature of the work. But it usually involves a mix of people, including product owners, business analysts, technical experts, and customer representatives. The goal is to bring together the people who have the best understanding of the work, the priorities, and the customer needs.
So it's a collaborative effort to make sure the right work is getting done at the right time. It's like a strategic planning session for your Kanban system.
Exactly. And the last type of meeting that Leopold recommends is the retrospective.
Retrospectives. I've heard of those in the context of agile development. How do they fit into Kanban?
Retrospectives are periodic meetings where teams reflect on their work processes, identify areas for improvement, and develop action plans for implementing those improvements.
So it's a time for the team to step back, look at the big picture, and see what's working well and what could be done better. It's like a regular checkup for your Kanban system.
Precisely. And retrospectives are a crucial element of continuous improvement in Kanban. They provide a structured and collaborative forum for learning from experience and making incremental changes to optimize workflows and deliver more value to customers.
So it's not about pointing fingers or assigning blame. It's about working together as a team to identify areas for improvement and create a better system for everyone.
Exactly. And to make retrospectives more effective, Leopold suggests using a simple but powerful framework that includes steps like setting the stage, gathering data, generating insights, developing action plans, and closing the retrospective.
It sounds like a really valuable process for any team that wants to embrace continuous improvement and create a more efficient and fulfilling work environment.
Absolutely. And it's a great example of how Kanban is not just about tools and techniques. It's about creating a culture of learning, collaboration, and continuous improvement.
Now, speaking of continuous improvement, This is something that's really emphasized throughout Leopold's book.
It is.
It's not just about implementing Kanban and then calling it a day.
Right.
It's about constantly looking for ways to optimize your workflow and deliver more value.
Exactly. Continuous improvement is at the heart of Kanban.
Yeah.
It's a mindset that embraces change, experimentation, and a relentless pursuit of excellence.
So it's not about finding the perfect Kanban system.
Right.
It's about constantly evolving and improving it based on feedback and data.
Precisely. And to illustrate the power of continuous improvement, Leopold shares several case studies of companies that have successfully implemented Kanban and embraced this mindset. One of the most inspiring examples is a company called Bosch Automotive Electronics.
Bosch, that's a huge company.
It is.
What were they doing with Kanban?
They were using Kanban to transform their operations and become a learning organization.
Wow.
They wanted to improve collaboration, streamline workflows, and empower employees to contribute to continuous improvement efforts.
That's a really ambitious goal. How did they go about implementing Kanban on such a large scale?
They started by focusing on specific areas where they were experiencing pain points,
Okay.
like long lead times, bottlenecks, and communication breakdowns.
Right.
They used Kanban to visualize their workflows, identify areas for improvement, and implement changes incrementally.
So they didn't try to do everything at once. They took a more iterative and experimental approach.
Exactly. And this allowed them to learn as they went, adapt their approach, and build momentum for change throughout the organization.
What kind of results did they see?
They saw significant improvements in their efficiency, their lead times, and their customer satisfaction. But more importantly, they created a culture where employees were empowered to identify problems, experiment with solutions, and continuously improve the way they worked.
That's really inspiring.
It is.
It shows that Kanban can be a powerful tool for transforming not just individual teams, but entire organizations.
Absolutely. And it highlights the importance of leadership commitment and a culture that embraces experimentation and continuous learning.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today, and I feel like I've learned a lot about the power of Kanban to improve workflow.
It's a great overview.
Enhance collaboration and deliver more value, but I'm sure there's still much more to explore.
Oh, there definitely is. And one of the most interesting and often misunderstood aspects of Kanban is the concept of scaling.
Scaling? You mean applying Kanban beyond just individual teams?
Exactly. It's about using Kanban to manage work and improve flow across multiple teams, departments, or even the entire organization.
That sounds like a pretty big challenge. How do you go about scaling Kanban effectively? Do you just create a giant Kanban board for the whole company?
It's a bit more nuanced than that.
Okay.
Leopold introduces a framework for scaling Kanban called flight levels.
Flight levels? I've never heard of that before. What are they?
They represent different levels of abstraction within the organization.
Okay.
Flight level 1 focuses on operational work. Flight level 2 deals with coordination between teams or departments.
Okay.
And flight level 3 addresses strategic portfolio management.
So it's like looking at the organization from different altitudes.
Right.
At the lowest level, you see the individual tasks and workflows. At the middle level, you see how those workflows interact and depend on each other.
Yeah.
And at the highest level, you're looking at the big picture.
Right.
The strategic goals and priorities of the organization.
Exactly. And by applying Kanban principles and practices at each of these flight levels, you can create a more integrated and aligned organization that's optimized for delivering value to customers.
So it's not just about scaling up the size of your Kanban boards.
Right.
It's about scaling up your thinking and your approach to managing work.
Precisely. And to illustrate how this works in the real world, Leopold shares a case study of a company that successfully scaled Kanban across their entire organization.
Okay.
They started with a single Kanban board for their IT department and gradually expanded it to encompass other departments, connecting the boards at different flight levels to create a seamless flow of work.
What kind of impact did this have on the organization?
They saw significant improvements in their communication, their collaboration, and their ability to deliver value to customers. They were able to break down silos, streamline workflows, and create a more agile and responsive organization.
That's a really powerful example of how Kanban can be used to transform not just individual teams, but entire organizations.
It is.
It's about creating a culture of continuous improvement.
Right.
Collaboration and customer focus.
Exactly. And it highlights the potential of Kanban to address some of the most pressing challenges that organizations face today.
This has been an incredibly insightful exploration of the world of Kanban. We've covered so much ground from the core principles to real-world examples and advanced concepts like scaling and flight levels.
We have, and we've only just scratched the surface of what's possible with Kanban. But hopefully we've given you a good foundation to start exploring and experimenting with this powerful framework in your own work.
I know I'm definitely going to be trying out some of these ideas, but before we wrap up completely,
All right.
I'd love to hear your thoughts on one of the biggest challenges that many organizations face today.
Right.
Managing the constant influx of new work and demands.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
How does Kanban help with this?
That's a great question, and it's something that Leopold addresses directly in his book.
Okay.
He argues that Kanban can be a powerful tool for managing demand and ensuring that you're focusing on the work that delivers the most value.
So it's not just about getting things done faster.
Right.
It's about getting the right things done.
Exactly. And one of the key principles for managing demand in Kanban is to make your work visible.
Okay.
By visualizing your workflow on a Kanban board, you can see at a glance what's in progress, what's waiting to be started, and what's coming down the pipeline. This transparency can be really helpful for making decisions about what to work on next and what to defer or decline.
So it's about creating a shared understanding of the work and the priorities.
Exactly.
So everyone can make informed decisions about how to allocate their time and energy.
Precisely. And another key principle is to limit work in progress.
Okay.
We've talked about this in the context of improving flow, but it's also relevant for managing demand.
So by setting WIP limits, you're essentially creating a constraint on the amount of work that can be in progress at any given time.
Exactly.
And this can help you avoid feeling overwhelmed and ensure that you're focusing on the most important tasks.
Exactly. WIP limits force you to make choices about what to work on next and what to put on hold.
Right.
And they help you create a more predictable and sustainable rhythm of work, where you're not constantly juggling too many things at once.
It sounds like a much more balanced and sustainable approach to managing work than the constant firefighting and multitasking that many people experience today.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And to further enhance your ability to manage demand and make informed decisions about what to work on next, Leopold introduces a concept called the options pool.
The options pool. I haven't heard that term before. What is it?
It's a holding area for work items that haven't yet been pulled into the Kanban system for execution.
Okay.
It's essentially a backlog of potential work items that are waiting to be prioritized and scheduled.
So it's like a buffer zone between the incoming flow of new work and the active work that's being tracked on the Kanban board.
Exactly. And the options pool serves a few important purposes.
Okay.
First, it helps you create a clear separation between the work that's ready to be started and the work that's still being considered or planned.
So it helps you avoid cluttering up your Kanban board with too many work items and maintain a clear focus on the tasks that are currently in progress.
Exactly. Second, the options pool allows you to gather more information about potential work items before committing to them.
Okay.
You can use this time to refine requirements, estimate effort, and assess risks.
So it's not just about capturing new work requests.
Right.
It's about taking a more deliberate and strategic approach to evaluating those requests and deciding which ones are worth pursuing. It's like having a waiting room for your tasks.
I like that.
Where you can screen them before letting them into the main workflow.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
And third, the options pool helps you create a more predictable and manageable flow of work into the Kanban system.
Okay.
By having a pool of potential work items to choose from.
Yeah.
You can replenish your Kanban board in a more controlled and strategic way, ensuring that you're always working on the most important tasks.
So it's not just about reacting to the latest urgent request.
Right.
It's about having a more proactive and planned approach to managing the flow of work.
Exactly. And to make the options pool even more effective, Leopold suggests using a technique called triage.
Triage, isn't that a medical term?
Yes. And it's a great analogy for how we can approach managing the options pool. In a medical setting, triage is about prioritizing patients based on the severity of their injuries.
Right.
Similarly, in Kanban, triage is about prioritizing work items based on their importance, urgency, and value.
So you're essentially applying a filter to the incoming flow of work.
Exactly.
Making sure that the most important and valuable items are the ones that get pulled into the Kanban system first.
Exactly. And this helps you avoid getting bogged down in low value or low urgency tasks and ensures that you're focusing your energy on the work that matters most.
This is all starting to make a lot of sense, but it sounds like it requires a shift in mindset for many people.
It does.
Instead of just reacting to whatever comes their way,
Right.
they need to be more proactive and strategic about how they manage their work.
That's true, and it's not always easy. But Kanban provides a framework for making that shift and creating a more balanced and sustainable way of working.
And it's a framework that can be applied to any type of work,
It can.
from software development to marketing to finance.
Absolutely. And one of those powerful aspects of Kanban is its ability to help you make work more visible,
Right.
which is essential for effective collaboration and communication.
We talked about this earlier in the context of Kanban boards, but I'm curious to hear more about how Kanban can be used to make work more visible beyond just the team level.
Okay.
How does it apply to the broader organization?
Leopold introduces the concept of portfolio Kanban,
Okay.
which is essentially applying Kanban principles to the management of strategic initiatives and projects at the organizational level.
So instead of just tracking individual tasks,
Right.
you're tracking the progress of larger initiatives that involve multiple teams and departments.
Exactly. And this can be incredibly valuable for creating alignment, transparency, and accountability across the organization.
What are some of the key benefits of using Portfolio Kanban?
First, it helps you create a shared understanding of the organization's strategic goals and priorities. By visualizing those goals on a Kanban board, everyone can see what's important, how their work contributes to the bigger picture, and how their team's progress impacts the overall strategy.
So it's like having a roadmap for the entire organization where everyone can see where they're going and how they're getting there.
Exactly. Second, Portfolio Kanban helps you improve communication and collaboration across teams and departments.
Okay.
By visualizing dependencies between different initiatives, you can identify potential roadblocks and work together to resolve them more effectively.
So instead of working in silos, teams can collaborate more effectively and ensure that their work is aligned with the overall goals of the organization.
Exactly. Third, Portfolio Kanban helps you make better decisions about resource allocation.
Right.
By visualizing the capacity of different teams and departments, you can allocate resources more effectively to the initiatives that will deliver the most value.
So you're not just throwing resources at the loudest voice or the latest emergency.
Right.
You're making strategic decisions based on a clear understanding of the organizations. It's amazing how powerful a simple shift in mindset can be.
It really is. And speaking of mindset shifts,
Yeah.
Leopold talks about something called a Kaizen loop, which is a core concept in continuous improvement.
I've heard of Kaizen before, but I'm not entirely sure what it means. Can you explain it in the context of Kanban?
Kaizen is a Japanese term that essentially means continuous improvement.
Okay.
It's about making small, incremental changes over time to improve processes, products, and services, and the Kaizen loop is a visual representation of this process.
So it's not about making big, sweeping changes all at once. It's about taking small steps and constantly iterating. It's like the saying, slow and steady wins the race.
Exactly. And the Kaizen loop is often represented as a circle with 4 steps. Plan, do, check, act.
Okay, let's break that down, what happens in each step of the Kaizen loop.
In the plan step, you identify a problem or an opportunity for improvement and develop a hypothesis about how to address it. Then in the do step, you implement your plan on a small scale, perhaps as a pilot project or experiment.
So you're not making a big commitment up front. You're testing the waters first to see if your idea actually works.
Exactly. Then in the check step, you gather data and feedback to see if your change had the desired effect. And finally, in the act step, you decide whether to adopt the change more broadly, modify it based on what you learned, or abandon it altogether.
So it's a cycle of continuous learning and adaptation.
It is.
You're constantly experimenting, gathering feedback, and making adjustments to improve your work processes.
Precisely. And this Kaizen loop is at the heart of the Kanban philosophy. It's what makes Kanban a dynamic and evolving system, constantly adapting to meet changing needs and challenges.
It sounds like a really powerful framework for continuous improvement, but how do you actually apply it in a real-world setting?
Leopold provides several examples in his book of how companies have used the Kaizen loop to make significant improvements in their workflows.
Okay.
One example is a software development team that was struggling with long lead times.
Right.
They used the Kaizen loop to identify bottlenecks in their process experiment with different solutions and ultimately reduce their lead times by 50%.
That's an incredible improvement. It shows that the Kaizen loop is not just a theoretical concept. It's a practical tool that can deliver real results.
Absolutely. And it's a tool that can be used by anyone, regardless of their role or industry.
Yeah.
Whether you're a developer, a marketer, a manager, or a CEO, the Kaizen loop can help you approach your work in a more deliberate, data-driven, and continuously improving way.
This has been a really insightful discussion.
Yeah.
We've covered so much ground, from the core principles of Kanban to real-world examples of how it's being used to transform businesses. But I feel like you've only just scratched the surface.
There's always more to learn and explore with Kanban, and one of the best ways to deepen your understanding is to start experimenting with it in your own work.
So don't be afraid to try things out, see what works, and keep learning and adapting along the way.
Exactly. Kanban is all about continuous improvement, and the journey never really ends.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the world of Kanban. I hope you found this exploration as insightful and engaging as I have.
It's been a pleasure sharing these insights with you, and remember, the journey of continuous improvement never ends.
So keep experimenting, keep learning, and keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible until next time.
See you next time on the Facilitators Deep Dive Podcast, your podcast on your way to facilitation mastery. Until next time.
See you then.